Alright, this is Math 2, Unit 11, Worksheet 5, numbers 11 and 12. Number 11, a projectile is launched vertically from the top of a tower at a velocity of 80 feet per second. The tower is 200 feet high. The height of the projectile above the ground t seconds after launch is given by the function h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 80t plus 200. What is the maximum height achieved by the projectile? All right, so we got to remember in pretty much every word problem, the answer is the vertex. All right, so if we take a look at this problem, what we're basically talking about is a parabola, of course. And if we say this is 50, 100, 150, 200, here's the top of the tower, right here on the y-axis, and a projectile is fired up, and it'll go up and eventually come down and hit the ground. So what we need is the highest point will be the vertex. How long after firing does it reach its maximum height? So, and that's this time right here. So again, it'll reach its maximum height after t seconds. So we need to put this thing in vertex form using completing the square. So h of t equals negative 16 t squared plus 80t plus 200. All right, we're going to complete the square. So h of t equals negative 16. We're going to factor out that 16. Negative 16 times t squared equals negative 16t squared. And then negative 16 times negative 5t. Negative 16 times negative 5t will give you negative 80t. All right, and from here, we're going to add something inside. And then we have the plus 200, but if we're adding it inside, we have to subtract it on the outside. Now this one's going to get tricky because we are adding half of 5 squared. So half of 5 is 2.5, and then when we square it, we get 6.25. So we're going to add 6.25 here. But we got to remember, what are we going to subtract? If we were to distribute that negative 16 back in, we have to take 6.25 and multiply it times negative 16, and we get negative 100. So we're adding 6.25 here, but really what we have to subtract is 100 on the outside, because a negative 16 times 6.25 is 100. So if we're going to add 6.25, we have to subtract 100. Okay. So now, putting it in vertex form, it's h of t equals negative 16 times t minus 2.5 squared plus 100, which means your vertex up here is 2.5, 100. Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Big mistake here. This is negative 100. So when we add the opposite, because it's negative 16 times 6.25, which is negative 100, so what we do, we add the 6.5 here, but we subtract negative 100 on the outside. We add the opposite, we end up with 300 out here. So our vertex is actually 2.5, 300, because we're starting at 200. It's going to go up 100 feet in 2.5 seconds. So what is the maximum height of the projectile? Well, that is 300 feet. How long does it, after firing, does it reach its maximum height? 2.5 seconds. All right, going on to number 12. A ball is thrown vertically in the air with an initial velocity of 64 feet per second. The function y equals negative 16t squared plus 64t gives its height above the ground after t seconds. What is the height after 1.5 seconds? All right, well for this we don't have to do anything. We'll just go ahead and plug in 1.5. So that's y equals negative 16 times 1.5 squared plus 64 times 1.5. And we'll plug that into our calculator here. And we have negative 16 times 1.5 squared. Make sure you get out of there. Plus 64 times 1.5. And we get 60, what are we at? 60 feet. So the answer is, what is the height after 1.5 seconds? And it is 60 feet. Okay, B, what is the maximum height? All right, well that's where we need the vertex. So let's convert this to vertex form. So y equals negative 16. I'm going to factor out that negative 16, which leaves me t squared minus, what do we get, 4? 4t plus, we're going to add something, and then we're going to subtract something. We're going to add it on the inside, subtract it on the outside. What are we going to add? Half of 4 squared, which is half of 4 is 2, and 2 squared is 4. And then we go negative 16 times 4 to give us negative 64. So when we finish up vertex form, we get y equals negative 16 times t minus 2 squared plus 64, because we add the opposite. What is the maximum height? 64 feet. Okay, because the vertex is 264. Okay. And finally, when will the ball hit the ground? Well, that's the zeros. Okay, so let's go back to that original equation. We have negative 16t squared plus 64t. And where is it on the ground? It's on the ground at time 0, and basically when the ball is on the ground when y equals 0. So one of the answers should be, for t, should be 0, and the other is going to be a few seconds later. So let's go ahead and solve this. So to solve it, we want to put it into vertex form. So let's convert that. We already have it converted. Remember, when y equals 0, it's on the ground. The ball is on the ground, because when y is 0, we're on the x-axis. Alright, so let's take negative 16 times t minus 2 squared plus 64, set that equal to 0. We'll subtract 64 from both sides. We get negative 16 times t minus 2 squared equals negative 64. We'll divide both sides by negative 64, and we get t minus 2 squared equals 4. We'll take the square root of both sides, and we get t minus 2 equals plus or minus 2. We'll add 2 to both sides, and we get t equals 2 plus 2, which is 4, and 2 minus 2, which is 0. So this is before the ball is thrown. It's on the ground, and then we throw it up in the air. It goes up to a maximum height of 64 feet in 2 seconds, and then 2 seconds later, it's back on the ground. So this is, when will the ball hit the ground? 4 seconds after it's thrown. Okay, I hope that helps.